The false refuge. There are places that aren't marked on maps, not because they were forgotten, but because the land itself tries to hide them. Places where time flows differently, and the laws of nature give way to something ancient and hungry. It was into such a place that three friends wandered unknowingly. Their names were Anton, Lyra, and Ilya. Their journey into the Carpathians began as a dream, filming wild nature, escaping the city noise, testing their limits. But on the seventh day, that dream turned into agony. Day 7. Somewhere in the dead heart of the Carpathians, the forest around them no longer whispered. It was silent, a crushing, absolute silence, unbroken by rustling leaves or birdsong. The giant trees stood like gravestones, their black branches scratching at the leaden sky. "I can't go on." Lyra's voice was barely audible. She sank onto the damp moss, leaning against the trunk of a mossy tree. Her face, usually lively and smiling, had grown gaunt and pale. Her camera, once her loyal companion, now hung limply from her neck, a useless piece of plastic and glass. All batteries, including the power banks, had died several days ago. Anton, who was walking ahead, stopped and turned. He tried to stay the leader, but his shoulders sagged under the weight of his backpack and despair. "We have to keep going, Lyra. If we stop here, we stay here." "Go where?" Ilya interjected, the quietest of the three. He stared into the endless rows of identical trees. "We've been going north for 3 days if that damn moss isn't lying. And still nothing. No path, no river, not a single sign of people. Like the whole world just died." "Then we keep going until we drop," Anton said sharply. But his voice had lost its former confidence. Hunger gnawed at their stomachs, and their flasks were nearly empty. They walked for several more hours, moving mechanically until their strength finally gave out. And just when it seemed all hope was gone, they saw it through the dense wall of trees. A house. It stood in a small clearing in the very heart of the dead forest, an old blackened structure half sunken into the earth. The windows were boarded up with crooked planks, and the weathered walls were covered in deep gouges, as if made by giant claws. Above the entrance, burned directly into the wood, was a strange spiral symbol that radiated something foreign and wrong. "What the hell is that?" Lyra whispered, raising her weakened hand with the camera out of habit. "It's a chance not to die tonight," Anton said firmly. "Let's go." The door creaked open with a deafening groan, like it was protesting the disturbance. Inside, it smelled of damp, dust, and something else, something sickly sweet and corpse-like. The air was heavy and cold. "What a dump," Ilya muttered, looking around. "Feels like we just walked into a crypt." They dropped their backpacks in the center of the only large room. The furnishings were sparse: a rough wooden table, a couple of chairs, and a fireplace filled with debris. A rickety staircase led to the second floor, vanishing into darkness. "Let's look around," Anton ordered. "Ilya, see if we can light a fire in the fireplace. Lyra, search for anything useful. I'll check upstairs." The first night. As dusk fell, the house was swallowed by complete darkness. They managed to start a small fire in the fireplace, casting twitchy, grotesque shadows on the walls. The friends huddled close together, trying to stay warm and avoid looking into the dark corners of the room. "Guess no one's been here for a long time," Lyra tried to break the silence. "And thank God," Ilya replied. And at that moment, from upstairs, the attic, came a sound, a loud, distinct creak of a floorboard. Then another, and then slow, shuffling footsteps. Something big was walking directly above them. All three froze, staring at the ceiling. "You heard that, Lyra?" Lyra whispered. Anton slowly stood up, grabbing the thickest stick they'd gathered for firewood. "Stay here!" "Are you crazy? Don't go up there alone," Lyra protested. "I have to," he said, and began climbing the creaky stairs. Ilya followed, armed with another stick. Upstairs was just one room, a cluttered attic draped in cobwebs. Moonlight peeked through a crack in the roof, illuminating the silhouettes of old furniture covered in white cloths like shrouds. No one there. "It's empty," Anton said with relief. But Ilya wasn't listening. His eyes were locked on a large, dust-covered mirror standing by the far wall. Its frame was blackened, and the glass was riddled with deep cracks. "Weird mirror," he muttered, stepping closer. Anton and Lyra, who couldn't bear to wait and had come upstairs too, approached him. In the cracked, cloudy surface, their three gaunt figures stared back. They stood still, peering into their reflections. And then Lyra gasped. "What is it?" Anton asked. "My reflection," her voice trembled. "It blinked." "Lyra, you're just tired," Anton started, but then fell silent because he saw it too. Their reflections. They moved with a barely perceptible, eerie delay. When Ilya slowly turned his head, his reflection remained still for a fraction of a second, then twitched to catch up. Anton jerked back, pulling the others with him. In the depths of the mirror, behind their reflections, something else flickered. A shadow. Tall. Dark. They tumbled down the stairs, slamming the imaginary door to the attic shut behind them. No one spoke a word. They just sat by the fire, staring into the dying embers, knowing one thing for certain: they weren't alone in that house. The first night in the cursed refuge had only just begun.
The siege. Terror comes in many forms. Sometimes it's sharp, like a knife strike when something jumps out of the dark. And sometimes it's thick and suffocating, like a swamp. It doesn't attack. It slowly pulls you under, draining your will, poisoning your mind. After the encounter with the mirror, the fear in the house became tangible. It lingered in the air, now heavy and dense, like before a thunderstorm. No one slept for the rest of the night. Every creak, every rustle made them flinch. They sat back to back by the dying fire, listening to the silence of the attic. It felt as if the unseen thing above had also gone still and was waiting. By morning, a dull, lifeless light barely seeped through the cracks in the boarded windows. The house looked even more pitiful and hostile than it had at night. "We're leaving," Lyra said firmly. Her face was resolute. "Right now. I'd rather starve to death in the forest than stay here another night." And where are we supposed to go? Anton objected. He looked terrible. A sleepless night and sheer horror had made him irritable. Wander in circles through that forest again? We barely made it here. We need at least a day to recover. Maybe it was all hallucinations from exhaustion. Do you believe that yourself? Ilya interrupted. What happened in the mirror? It was real. And the footsteps too. This place is cursed. Let it be cursed, Anton snapped. Out there is certain death. At least in here we've got a roof over our heads. We survive one more day, one more night, and tomorrow we try to push east. That's logical. The word logical sounded absurd in the dead silence of the house. Lyra wanted to argue, but had no strength left. The truth was, they really were too weak to go on. The decision, as awful as it was, had been made. They would stay. The day passed in heavy anticipation. They tried to explore the house, avoiding the stairs to the attic. In the kitchen, they found several cans of preserved food, rusted, caked in dust. Their contents had turned into an inedible black moosh. In one of the rooms, a headless ragdoll lay abandoned on the floor. It seemed the former occupants had fled the house in a hurry. A terrible one. The second night. As darkness fell, the tension reached its peak. They barricaded the front door with the table and gathered once more by the fireplace. This time there were no sounds from the attic. The silence was even more dreadful. Then, Lyra, with the sharpest hearing among them, froze. You hear that? At first, it was barely perceptible. A low, drawn-out howl from far away. But it wasn't like any ordinary wolf's howl. It carried sorrow, pain, and something beyond human, a savage, alien fury. The howl came again, now closer. Then another joined it, and another. Soon it felt like the house was surrounded by an entire pack. Wolves, Ilya said, his eyes wide with terror. Anton crept up to one of the windows and carefully pried a board aside to peek outside. The moon had broken through the clouds, bathing the clearing in ghostly light. What he saw made his blood run cold. There were wolves around the house. A dozen, maybe more. Huge, with matted fur. But they didn't move. They didn't sniff around. They didn't growl. They didn't act like wild animals. They just stood there, perfectly still, arranged in a flawless, unnatural circle, staring at the house, like sentinels, like soldiers of a dark army. They're just standing there, Anton muttered, unable to believe his eyes. What is it? Lyra asked, crawling up beside him. In that moment, Anton snapped. The fear and hopelessness he had been holding in finally broke free. He slammed his fist against the wall next to the window and shouted through the crack, "What do you want? Get the hell out of here!" One of the wolves, the largest, standing directly opposite the window, slowly turned its head, and in the moonlight, Anton saw its eyes. They weren't animal eyes, yellow, wild, and indifferent. They were human, filled with conscious, icy hatred and grim intelligence. The wolf was looking directly at Anton. Anton staggered back from the window as if struck. Their eyes are human! At that very moment, a scraping sound echoed through the room. It wasn't coming from the attic or the basement. It was coming from the walls.
Right before their eyes, strange new symbols began to appear on the inside of the wooden walls. They weren't carved or burned in. They emerged on their own, as if something unseen was scratching them out from within the wood. The same spiral, crooked symbols, like the one above the door. The house was coming alive. It was changing. And the friends realized they weren't just trapped in an old building. They were caught in a living, breathing organism. One that was slowly curling its claws around them. The second night promised to be far more terrifying than the first.
The threshold to nowhere. There is a threshold beyond which the human mind refuses to perceive reality, when the laws of physics break down and space and time begin to bend under the pressure of an unknown will. The third night became that threshold for them, a threshold beyond which there was no return. There was no sleep. There could be none. After what they saw, they didn't even try to close their eyes. They sat, huddled together in the center of the room, staring at the fresh, grotesque symbols covering the walls. The howling outside had stopped, but something worse had taken its place. A low, vibrating hum. It started subtly, like a tremor in their bones, but gradually intensified until it filled everything. It felt as if the air itself, the floor, the walls, all of it was humming. Breathing became difficult, as if a lead slab had been placed on their chests. A constant ringing echoed in their ears. "What's happening?" Ilya gasped, clutching his ears. "The house, it's shaking," Lyra replied. And then they appeared. From the forest, from that same dead silence, figures emerged onto the moonlit clearing. They didn't look like people, nor like wolves. Tall, unnaturally thin, emaciated. Their bodies were covered in patches of dark fur and remnants of what once might have been skin. They moved slowly, dragging their feet, but there was an unrelenting purpose in their motion. Werewolves? Ghosts? Something far older and more terrifying. They approached the house and stopped, staring at it with empty eye sockets. The creatures' faces shifted constantly, melting as if made of wax. One of them raised its head, and its gaze seemed to pierce through the boarded-up windows, straight into the friends huddled inside. A voice rang out, creaky, like grinding stones, but distinct. It wasn't outside. It echoed inside their heads. "You were not meant to find this house." The voice fell silent for a moment, as if searching for words in a forgotten language. "It doesn't belong to your time." Panic. Pure, primal panic engulfed them. Anton leapt up with a scream and started running around the room. "They're coming for us! They'll break the door down!" They reinforced the barricade, pushing a table and chairs against it, but it was useless. The walls of the house began to crack, truly crack. The wood bent, boards flew off the windows. The vibrating hum grew into a deafening roar. And in that chaos, Anton disappeared. He didn't scream. No one dragged him away. He simply took a step backward into a dark corner of the room where there was a barely noticeable door to the basement that no one had paid attention to. He backed away from the window, stumbled, and just vanished, as if the darkness in the basement doorway was not the absence of light, but a material substance that swallowed him whole. "Anton!" Lyra screamed. She rushed toward the basement, but Ilya grabbed her hand. "Don't! He's not there anymore!" At that moment, one of the window boards burst off with a sharp crack, and through the opening, one of those shifting, melting faces peered inside. That was too much for Lyra. She broke free from Ilya's grip, panicked, and ran to the back wall where they had earlier managed to loosen some boards.
Desperately working with her hands, she made herself a passage. With a scream of horror, she burst out of the house and ran into the dark, dead forest, toward the unknown, just to get away from that place. Ilya was left alone. He curled up in a corner, paralyzed with terror. The roar and vibration reached their peak and then suddenly stopped. Absolute, ringing silence fell. The creatures outside were gone. The house was still. Ilya didn't know how long he stayed like that. An hour? An eternity? When he finally found the strength to raise his head, he saw Lyra's camera on the floor. She must have dropped it when she ran. With trembling hands, he picked it up. His fingers instinctively found the record button, though he knew the battery had long died. But suddenly, the small screen lit up. The house, or whatever controlled it, had given it power. The hand holding the camera shakes, the lens catching the dark, ruined room, broken windows, and fresh symbols on the walls. The camera slowly pans across the empty space where his friends once sat. Then it turns, and for a moment, Ilya's face appears in the lens, twisted in horror, mad. He speaks the last words the tape will capture. The voice is quiet, strained, filled with existential dread. I am alone, or am I not anymore?